The rain on Kepler 442b fell sideways, driven by winds that could strip flesh from bone. Through the scope of her rifle, Maya Chen watched droplets streak across her vision like silver bullets. She had been lying in the mud for 72 hours, waiting for this moment. The Hegemony Patrol moved through the ruined city below with the arrogance of conquerors who had never known defeat. Their exoskeletons gleamed despite the storm, each soldier standing 12 feet tall, their bodies a perfect fusion of organic tissue and quantum phase armor. For 300 years, they had ruled over 200 species across the galaxy with this same casual brutality. Maya shifted imperceptibly, her modified human muscles compensating for the planet's crushing gravity. The enhancement surgery had nearly killed her, but it allowed humans to operate on worlds where even the hegemony needed mechanical assistance. She was one of only 47 successful recipients of the procedure. 46 now, after Jakarta fell last week. Through her scope, she tracked the patrol leader. Commander Vrex moved with the fluid grace of a predator that had forgotten it could be prey. His 4 arms gestured as he communicated with his squad through their neural link, probably discussing which human settlement to cleanse next. The hegemony called it pest control. They had been calling it that since first contact 50 years ago. Maya's finger rested on the trigger of a weapon that shouldn't exist. The rifle had no name, only a designation: Project Longshot. 3 years of reverse engineering hegemony shield technology, combined with human ingenuity and desperation, had produced exactly 7 of these weapons. Maya had the last functional one. She thought about the message she had recorded before taking position. If she died here, when she died here, it would broadcast across every human communication channel, both official and underground. She had kept it simple. No grand speeches, no calls for vengeance, just the truth about what the hegemony had done to Earth, to Mars, to the colony worlds, and more importantly, what they planned to do next. The wind shifted. Commander Vrex paused, his head tilting in that peculiar way that meant his enhanced senses had detected something. Maya's heartbeat slowed. This was the critical moment. One shot. The shields would adapt after the first impact, making a second shot impossible. One shot to prove the hegemony could bleed. She had studied Vrex for months. He commanded the unit that had glassed New Sydney. 2 million humans turned to ash in minutes. Children, families, artists and teachers and doctors, all pests in the eyes of the galaxy's rulers. Maya thought about her daughter, safe in the hidden bunkers of Proxima Centauri. Little Anna would be 7 now, old enough to understand why Mommy had to leave, old enough to know that sometimes one person had to stand up, even if standing up meant falling down forever. The targeting computer in her scope calculated wind speed, gravity, the Coriolis effect of the planet's rotation. Numbers flashed green. Perfect shot alignment. Maya's breathing stopped. In that moment of absolute stillness between heartbeats, she remembered her grandfather's words. Heroes aren't the ones who survive the story, child. Heroes are the ones who make sure there's a story to tell. She squeezed the trigger. The projectile moved at 98% of light speed, a needle of impossibly dense matter wrapped in quantum fields that humanity had barely begun to understand. It covered the 3 kilometers between Maya and her target in a fraction of a heartbeat. Commander Vrex's shields flared brilliant white, then shattered like glass made of stars. The projectile continued through his chest, leaving a hole the size of a dinner plate. For a moment, the massive alien stood frozen, his 4 arms spread wide in surprise. Then he toppled backward into the mud. The patrol erupted into chaos. Soldiers dove for cover, their weapons sweeping the hills. Maya knew she had seconds before they triangulated her position. She triggered the dead man's switch on her communicator. Her final message would broadcast the moment her heart stopped beating. She aimed at a second target, knowing the shot would fail. The rifle's power cell was already critical, overtaxed by the impossible physics of the first shot. She fired anyway. As predicted, the energy beam splashed harmlessly against adapted shields, but it gave away her position. Maya stood up, letting them see her. A lone human woman on a hilltop, rain streaming down her face, holding a weapon that had just done the impossible. She wanted them to remember this image. She wanted them to know that humans would never stop fighting. The return fire came instantly. Dozens of energy beams converged on her position. Maya's last thought was of her daughter's smile. Her body fell, but the signal had already gone out. Across human space, on every screen and holographic display, her message began to play. Not the message she had recorded, but something far more powerful. The live feed from her scope, showing Commander Vrex falling, showing that the hegemony could die just like anyone else. The timestamp at the bottom of the broadcast read, 14 GAS Galactic Standard Time. In 30 minutes, everything would change. The hegemony response was swift and predictable. Admiral Korthax appeared on every communication channel, his 6 eyes burning with fury. The terrorist responsible for this cowardly attack has been eliminated, he announced. Let this serve as a reminder of what happens to those who oppose the natural order. The human responsible is dead. Order has been restored, but Admiral Korthax had made a crucial error. In their arrogance, the hegemony had broadcast Maya's death across their entire network, to every subject species, to every corner of their empire. They wanted to show that resistance was futile. They showed something else entirely. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had been slaves for centuries saw a single human woman stand against their oppressors. They saw her die, yes, but first, they saw her kill the unkillable. On Arcturus Prime, the Solani workers in the quantum mines looked at their overseers differently. Their crystalline bodies hummed with a frequency that hadn't been heard in generations. The battle hymn their ancestors sang before the hegemony broke them. In the factory worlds of the Vegan system, the mechani ceased their eternal labor for exactly 1.7 seconds. In their synchronized consciousness, a new calculation propagated. If one human with one weapon could kill one hegemony commander, what could 1 trillion workers do with 1 trillion tools? The hegemony had ruled through fear and the certainty of their invincibility. Maya's single shot had cracked that certainty. Her death, broadcast to every corner of the galaxy, was the crack becoming a fissure. On Earth, in the ruins of what had once been Geneva, an old man named Marcus Chen watched his granddaughter die on a flickering screen. He had taught her to shoot on their farm in Kansas before the bombs fell. He had told her stories of heroes who didn't survive to see the better world they fought for. He opened a secure channel, one of many the resistance had hidden in the quantum noise of hegemony communications. Longshot is complete, he said simply. Begin avalanche. Across human space, similar messages flashed through hidden networks. Sleeper cells activated. Hidden weapons came online. Ships thought destroyed, powered up in asteroid fields and nebulae. Humanity had learned something in 50 years of occupation. They had learned patience. They had learned to hide. Most importantly, they had learned that the hegemony's greatest weakness was their inability to imagine defeat. The timestamp read 14:05 GRAS. 25 minutes remained. In the depths of space, aboard the hegemony flagship Eternal Dominion, Admiral Korthax reviewed the broadcast again. Something bothered him. The human woman had stood up after her first shot. She had made herself a target. Why? His tactical officer, a nervous Quellian with too many eyes, suggested, perhaps she knew escape was impossible? No, Korthax murmured. She wanted to be seen. She wanted to die visibly. He turned to his intelligence chief. What do we know about human death rituals? They often sacrifice themselves for symbolic purposes, Admiral. Their history is full of individuals dying to inspire others. A cold feeling crept through Korthax's 3 hearts. Scan all frequencies, all of them. Find out what else is being transmitted. But it was already too late. Maya's death had not been the message. Her death had been the carrier wave, ensuring the real message would be seen by everyone. As the hegemony broadcast her fall across the galaxy, hidden in the quantum signatures of the transmission, terabytes of data flowed to every receiver: weapon specifications, shield frequencies, patrol schedules, the location of every hegemony supply depot, communication hub, and command center. 50 years of human intelligence gathering, compressed and hidden in the static of a single broadcast. The hegemony had just delivered the keys to their own destruction to every enslaved species in the galaxy. The timestamp read 1410 Sakar. 20 minutes remained. The first to move were the Kenti. For 2 centuries, the 6-limbed insectoids had served as the hegemony's engineers, their compound eyes and natural understanding of 3-dimensional mathematics making them invaluable for maintaining the Empire's vast infrastructure. Every hegemony ship, every orbital station, every planetary defense grid bore the mark of Kenti craftsmanship. In the engine room of the battlecruiser Unstoppable Force, Senior Engineer Theta watched the human woman die on her monitor. She watched the hidden data stream flow across her screen, shield harmonics and weapon specifications scrolling past faster than even her multifaceted eyes could follow. But she didn't need to read it all. She only needed to see one thing: the quantum signature of hegemony shield generators. The one secret the Masters had kept even from their most trusted servants. Theta's mandibles clicked in what her species considered laughter. She turned to her clutched siblings working beside her. Begin Protocol 7. Protocol 7 does not exist, her second replied automatically. It does now. Across the engine room, Kenti engineers began implementing modifications they had only dreamed of. Small changes. Tiny alterations to power flow, minute adjustments to field harmonics, invisible sabotage that would bloom into catastrophe at exactly the right moment. The same scene played out on every hegemony vessel. The Masters had made a critical error. They had taught their slaves too well. Every system had a Kenti whisper net, quantum-encrypted communications that lived in the waste heat of the very engines they maintained. Within 3 minutes of Maya's broadcast, 70% of the hegemony fleet was compromised. The timestamp read 1413. On the agricultural world of Haven, Overseer Grax noticed the human workers moving differently. They had always been model slaves, quiet, efficient, accepting of their fate. But now they walked with purpose. They made eye contact. They smiled. Increase surveillance, he ordered his hegemony guards. Something is wrong. Private Julia Martinez heard the order through the listening device she had planted in the overseer's office 3 months ago. She touched her ear, acknowledging the command from Resistance headquarters. All across the fields, human workers received the same message. Avalanche begins in 15 minutes. Prepare positions. She reached into her tool bag, past the seed packets and fertilizer, to the small device hidden at the bottom. It looked like a farming implement. In a way, it was. It would help them harvest something that had been growing for 50 years. The hegemony had never understood human agriculture, had never grasped why the conquered species insisted on working the soil when food replicators were more efficient. They had allowed it as a harmless quirk, a way to keep the humans docile. They had never realized that every farm was a weapons laboratory. Fertilizer became explosives. Farming equipment became projectile weapons. The vast irrigation systems that watered the crops could be overloaded to create electromagnetic pulses. Julia looked at her watch. 12 minutes. In the Senate chambers of the hegemony capital world, Prime Minister Vexath called an emergency session. Representatives of the ruling caste filled the vast amphitheater, their voices raised in angry debate. One human with one weapon, Senator Krex roared. This is what comes of showing mercy. We should have exterminated them all. The situation is contained, Vexath insisted. The terrorist is dead. Order will be restored. Senator Ilara, old even by hegemony standards, spoke quietly. Has anyone noticed that our subject species are not responding to commands with their usual speed? A nervous aide rushed to Vexath's podium. Prime Minister, we're receiving reports of irregularities. The Mechani have increased their work speed by 300%. The Kenti are performing unscheduled maintenance. The Solani miners are singing. Singing? Vexath's four arms gestured confusion. Why is that significant? They haven't sung since we conquered them, sir. The chamber fell silent. 300 years of absolute rule, and their subjects were singing. The timestamp read 1418. Bah. On the frozen world of Hibernate, Dr. Sarah Woods initiated the final sequence. For 5 years, she had been a prisoner here, forced to use her medical knowledge to help the hegemony understand human physiology. They wanted to know how to kill humans more efficiently. She had given them exactly what they asked for. Every weakness, every vulnerability, every possible way to destroy a human body. The hegemony had been so pleased with her cooperation that they had shared their own biological data in return. Now, as Maya's hidden data stream gave her the last pieces of the puzzle, Sarah smiled. She had not been developing weapons to kill humans. She had been developing viruses that could survive in hegemony bloodstreams. She looked at the vial in her hand, harmless to every other species in the galaxy, lethal to the hegemony within hours of exposure, transmitted through air, water, and direct contact. The guards outside her laboratory had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed a 50-year-old human woman posed no physical threat. They had never searched her for biological weapons because they couldn't conceive of a human willingly infecting herself with a deadly virus. Sarah injected herself with the vial's contents. Then she walked to the door and asked the guards for help with a medical emergency. They rushed in without hesitation. By the time they realized their mistake, they were already infected. The timestamp read 1420. Admiral Korthax watched his tactical display with growing alarm. Red warning lights bloomed across the galactic map like a plague. Uprising on Haven. Communication blackout in the Vegan system. The entire Kenti engineering corps had gone silent. Sir, his intelligence officer reported, voice shaking, we've analyzed the hidden data in the terrorists' broadcast. It contains everything. Our shield frequencies, our patrol routes, the location of every... I know what it contains, Korthax roared. Shut down all communications. Cut the feeds. I can't, sir. The Kenti have locked us out of our own systems. Korthax's 6 eyes widened. The Kenti controlled their communications. The Mechani built their weapons. The humans grew their food. The Solani mined their fuel. They had built their empire on the backs of slaves, never realizing they had also built their own tomb. On Earth, Marcus Chen watched the countdown timer. His granddaughter had died at exactly the right moment. The hegemony's need to display their power, to show Maya's death to everyone, had been their downfall. He opened a channel to all resistance cells. 10 minutes to avalanche. All units confirm readiness. The responses came in from across human space and beyond. Resistance fighters, saboteurs, sleeper agents, and sympathizers from a dozen species, all waiting for the signal, all ready to move. But the humans were not leading this revolution. They had simply lit the fuse. On 1,000 worlds, slaves remembered they had once been free. On 1,000,000 ships, servants remembered they outnumbered their masters. In every corner of the hegemony's vast empire, the oppressed remembered they were many, and their oppressors were few. The hegemony had made the classic mistake of all empires. They had grown dependent on those they conquered. They had built their entire civilization on the assumption that their subjects would never realize their own power. Maya Chen had not died to inspire just humanity. She had died to show the entire galaxy a simple truth. The masters could fall. The timestamp read 1425 bikes. 5 minutes remained. Commander Thesak of the Hegemony Defense Force watched his fleet tear itself apart. The Kenti modifications activated simultaneously across thousands of vessels. Shields inverted, turning defense systems into prisons. Engines overloaded, turning warships into bombs. Navigation systems failed, sending capital ships crashing into each other. "Get me manual control," he screamed. "The manual controls were installed by the Kenti, sir," his aide replied quietly. Thesak watched the pride of the Hegemony fleet destroy itself in real time. 300 years of military dominance ended not in a great battle, but in a whisper of sabotage, a quiet betrayal by those they had never considered threats. On the mining world of Dig Site 7, the Solani emerged from the quantum tunnels they had spent generations carving. Not just mining tunnels, but a vast underground network connecting every hegemony facility on the planet. They flowed like living crystal through passages their overseers never knew existed. They reached the planetary defense grid in under a minute. The hegemony guards, soft from centuries of unchallenged rule, fell before they could sound an alarm. The Solani took control of the orbital weapons platforms and turned them toward the hegemony administrative centers. The same pattern repeated across the galaxy. Every species the hegemony had conquered had spent generations learning their oppressors' weaknesses. Every slave had become a student of their master's vulnerabilities. And now, with the technical data from Maya's broadcast, they had the means to exploit every weakness at once. The timestamp read 1428. In the Senate chambers, Prime Minister Vexath tried to maintain order as reports of disaster flooded in. "Deploy the Imperial Guard. Activate all reserves. Implement martial law on all core worlds." "With respect, Prime Minister," Senator Ilara said calmly, "the Imperial Guard is 40% Kenti, 30% Mechani, and 20% other subject species. Only 10% are hegemony." The math was inescapable. The hegemony had ruled through fear and superior technology. Take away the technology, remove the fear, and all that remained was mathematics. They were outnumbered 1,000,000 to 1. "We can negotiate," Vexath said desperately. "We can offer concessions, limited autonomy for subject worlds, representation in the Senate, anything." On the main view screen, Marcus Chen's face appeared. The old human looked tired but determined. "The time for negotiation was 50 years ago. You chose extermination. You chose to make examples of our worlds. You chose to broadcast my granddaughter's death to the entire galaxy." "It was one human," Vexath pleaded. "One death." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "One death that you showed to everyone. One death that proved you could die. One death that carried the keys to your destruction to every slave in your empire." He paused. "You taught the galaxy that one death could matter. Maya taught them which death to choose." The transmission ended. The timestamp read 1429 but 30. The last 30 seconds of the hegemony's 300-year rule began with silence. Across the galaxy, every enslaved being watched their chronometers. In factories and mines, on starships and space stations, in fields and cities, billions of souls held their breath. They had waited generations for this moment. They could wait 30 seconds more. The timestamp read 1429:31. Prime Minister Vexath stood in the Senate chamber, his forearms trembling. Around him, senators shouted orders that no one obeyed. The guards at the doors, Mechani warriors who had stood silent sentry for decades, remained motionless. Their loyalty programming had been overwritten by something far stronger: hope. 29 seconds. Senator Ilara said quietly. She alone among the hegemony leadership seemed resigned to their fate. "My grandmother told me this day would come. She said no empire built on suffering could last forever." "Silence, traitor!" Vexath snarled, but his voice cracked with fear. The timestamp read 1429:35. In the depths of space, the hegemony flagship Eternal Dominion drifted powerless. Admiral Korthax sat in his command throne, watching his empire collapse through dying sensor arrays. The Kenti had not simply sabotaged their fleet, they had turned it into the galaxy's largest fireworks display. One by one, hegemony warships self-destructed in perfectly timed explosions. Not random failures, but a synchronized performance. The explosions formed patterns visible from planets below, symbols of freedom in languages the hegemony had tried to erase. "Beautiful," his Kenti chief engineer said, entering the bridge unannounced. "We call it the Dance of Liberation. My ancestors designed it 200 years ago. We have been waiting for the right moment to perform it." Korthax reached for his sidearm, but his hand found only empty air. When had they disarmed him? When had the servants become the masters? The timestamp read 1429:40. On Haven, Julia Martinez stood with 10,000 other humans in the central plaza. The hegemony administrative tower loomed above them, its black walls reflecting centuries of oppression. Overseer Grax appeared on the building's massive display screen, his tentacles writhing in panic. "Return to your positions," he commanded. "Resume your duties. Obey or face the consequences." Julia smiled. "What consequences? Your fleet is burning. Your armies have turned. Your empire is already dead. You just haven't accepted it yet." She raised her hand. 10,000 humans raised their hands with her, a simple gesture but one forbidden for 50 years. The human salute of defiance. The timestamp read 1429:45. Dr. Sarah Woods felt the virus burning through her veins. It would kill her within hours, but she had accepted that price. Through her laboratory window, she watched hegemony soldiers collapsing as the infection spread with impossible speed. Their perfect immune systems, enhanced by centuries of genetic modification, had no defense against something designed specifically for them. She had not created a weapon of mass destruction. She had created a weapon of precise destruction. The virus would harm only the hegemony. Every other species would be immune. Even the hegemony's children, those rare few who had not yet undergone the genetic modifications of adulthood, would survive. "We're not like you," she whispered to the dying guard at her feet. "We know the difference between justice and genocide." The timestamp read 1429:50. On Earth, Marcus Chen initiated the final protocol. Hidden beneath the ruins of humanity's cities, in bunkers the hegemony had never found, weapons powered up. Not weapons of war, but weapons of communication. Quantum transmitters powerful enough to pierce any jamming, to reach every corner of the galaxy simultaneously. "This is Earth control to all free peoples," he broadcast. "The age of the hegemony ends now. What comes next? We build together." The responses came from every species, in every language, but carrying the same message. "We are free," the timestamp read 1429:55. In the Senate chambers, the lights went out. Emergency power failed to activate. The Mechaeni had seen to that. In the darkness, Vexath heard sounds he had never imagined. His senators weeping, proud hegemony warriors begging, the soft footsteps of their former slaves approaching. "Please," he whispered into the darkness, "we can change. We can be better." A voice answered him. Not human, not Kenti, not any single species, but somehow all of them. "Yes, you could have changed. You could have been better. You had 300 years to choose differently. You chose this." The timestamp read 1429:58. Admiral Korthax watched the final seconds tick away on his dying ship's chronometer. Through the view screen, he could see the lights of rebellion spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. Worlds that had been dark for centuries blazed with new light. Ships bearing the flags of free peoples emerged from hidden bases. The night of empire was ending. "Why?" he asked the Kenti engineer. "We gave you purpose. We gave you order." "You gave us chains," Tikatheta replied. "We gave ourselves freedom." The timestamp read 14:29:59. Maya Chen had been dead for exactly 29 minutes and 59 seconds. In that time, her death had traveled to every screen, every mind, every heart that had known oppression. One woman, one shot, one death that changed everything, not because she was special, but because she proved that anyone could be special, anyone could stand up, anyone could pull the trigger that brought down titans. The timestamp read 1430. The hegemony's galactic rule officially ended, but the real revolution had only just begun. In the aftermath, as historians would record, the collapse was total but not chaotic. The enslaved species had planned too long and too carefully for random violence. Hegemony leaders were arrested, not massacred. Their technology was preserved and shared, not destroyed. Their children were educated, not punished for their parents' crimes. The virus Dr. Woods had created claimed 90% of adult hegemony within a week. The survivors, mostly those who had shown kindness to their subjects over the years, were quarantined and treated. Some even lived, forever changed, forever humbled. The Kenti dismantled the hegemony fleet piece by piece, recycling the weapons of oppression into tools of construction. They built hospitals where warships had orbited. They created schools where military bases had stood. The Mechani, free from their programming, experienced choice for the first time in centuries. Some chose to remain mechanical. Others chose to become fully organic again. All chose freedom. The Solani emerged from their tunnels and mines to see stars they had been denied for generations. Their crystal bodies sang with frequencies of joy that resonated across light years, healing wounds that violence had carved in space itself. And the humans? The humans did what they had always done. They survived. They rebuilt. They remembered. On Proxima Centauri, a 7-year-old girl named Anna Chen watched the stars with her grandfather. He had arrived on one of the first freedom flights from Earth, carrying nothing but memories and hope. "Tell me about Mama again," Anna asked. Marcus gathered his granddaughter close. "Your mother was a teacher," he said. "She taught the galaxy that heroes don't need to survive their stories. They just need to make sure the story gets told." Was she scared? I'm sure she was. But she was brave too, and her bravery gave everyone else permission to be brave. Anna thought about this. Could I be brave like her? You already are, Marcus said. Every day we choose to be kind instead of cruel. Every time we build instead of destroy. Every moment we remember that freedom is worth any price. We're being brave like her. They watched the stars together. Grandfather and granddaughter, inheritors of a galaxy Maya Chen had freed with a single bullet and 30 minutes of perfect timing. In the great libraries of New Unity, the capital of the Galactic Alliance that rose from the hegemony's ashes, they built a monument to the revolution. Not a statue or a building, but a simple digital display showing a timestamp frozen at 14s, and below it, in every language of every free species, the same words: one shot, one death, one chance, one galaxy, free. Visitors often asked why they memorialized a death rather than celebrating the lives that followed. The librarians, be they human or Kenti, Mechani or Solani, always gave the same answer. We don't memorialize her death. We memorialize the moment her death gave life to everyone else. The hegemony had ruled through fear for 300 years. They fell in 30 minutes because they never understood a simple truth that every oppressed being knows in their bones. Fear is powerful, but hope is unstoppable. and hope travels at the speed of light. Years later, when the last hegemony survivors had integrated into the new society, when their children played alongside the children of those they had once enslaved, old soldiers would sometimes gather to discuss how it had all gone wrong. We had the weapons, they would say. We had the ships. We had the power. And always someone would remind them, but they had Maya Chen, and 30 minutes. That was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything. In the end, the hegemony's greatest mistake was not underestimating humanity. It was broadcasting proof that they could die. In showing Maya's death to the galaxy, they had shown the galaxy how to kill them. Poetic justice, some called it. Others called it inevitable. The enslaved species who had overthrown them called it something else, freedom. And unlike empires, freedom, once tasted, never dies. It only grows stronger with each generation that refuses to forget its price. Maya Chen had paid that price in full, and the galaxy had made sure her payment was not wasted. 30 minutes. That's all it took. 30 minutes to end 300 years. Time enough to change everything. Time enough to be free.